Today on the CTV News at 5, a Lethbridge funeral home operator is given a conditional discharge for fraud. Plus,
and life is like a song.
Local singing sensation Stephanie Savage gears up for McDonald's international competition. And the Medicine Hat Tigers are on the brink of elimination in playoff action.
CTV News with Jackie Scantlebury.
Good afternoon. A Lethbridge funeral home operator won't spend any time behind bars for defrauding clients. Last July, the owners of Cornerstone Funeral Home were charged with fraud for cremations they did for the province for the homeless. This morning, a provincial court judge handed down a conditional discharge for Ralph Zettner. Daryl Rummold reports.
There was no victory in today's decision for Ralph Zettner, only a sigh of relief, a long-awaited conclusion to a painful period of his life.
This has been the most challenging year of our lives, and we want to thank all the family and friends that have stood by and prayed for us.
Police allege Zettner and his wife Faith, owners of Cornerstone Funeral Home, inflated costs or billed the government for scattering or burying ashes of homeless people they didn't actually do. The Crown alleged 55 separate occasions of fraud over a 12-year span. Zettner pled guilty to one count of fraud under $5,000 last January.
As a business owner, I am ultimately responsible for all actions of our organization.
Inside a full Lethbridge courtroom, Zettner stood with his family behind him as the judge read his decision. A conditional discharge, 18 months probation, 100 hours of community service to be completed by March of next year, ordered to pay $250 in restitution to the provincial government, and donate $2,500 to both the Canadian Cancer Society and an organization that helps those on the blood reserve. The judge also ordered Zettner to give a series of lectures to students at mortuary colleges and members of his profession about the case, charges, and their effect on his business and family life.
It really sends the right message to everyone. Mr. Zettner took responsibility once it was identified for him that the irregularities that occurred were sanctionable, and so he stepped up and took responsibility for that.
In reading his decision, the judge told the court that media and publicity surrounding the case were taken into account, and the damage done by it both professionally and personally. He called it a more effective deterrent than incarceration ever could be.
Just the fact of the allegations and the publicity that's surrounded that had a real negative impact on Mr. Zettner and his family and their business as well. So, he really has been punished quite a bit.
On Friday, he'll learn the fate of his funeral director's license. Today, he'll begin the process of regaining the community's trust he hopes was never lost. Daryl Rummold, CTV News, Lethbridge.
If Ralph Zettner abides by today's ruling, he will not have a criminal record. And today's sentence is already generating heated reaction. Here are some comments from our CTV Lethbridge Facebook page. Tyler says very disappointed. The sentence should have been more severe than conditional discharge. He was in a position of significant trust. He breached that trust with people. According to Joe, they should have put him in jail. And Steve says the Canadian justice system is a joke. All you need is a little money and nothing will happen to you, in an absolute disrespect to his customers and their families. Well, a toddler is dead after being hit by a car in the Piikani First Nation. It happened just after 4 o'clock yesterday near Highway 3 and 76. The 3-year-old boy was pronounced dead at the scene. Few details are being released, but police say the matter is still under investigation.
A vehicle backing out of a driveway has struck and killed a small child. EMS were called. Unfortunately, the child had deceased at the scene. Piikani First Nations RCMP are working with victim services, the elders of the First Nations, in supporting the family in this tragic incident. We anticipate no charges, however, investigation is continuing.
The boy's name will not be released at the request of his family. Police say that neither drugs nor alcohol were factors in the accident. RCMP believe that speed was a factor in a serious crash near Nanton. A 25-year-old Calgary man was cut from the wreckage and airlifted to Foothills Hospital. The crash happened around 7 last night, 30 kilometers west of Nanton. Police believe the Calgary driver crossed into oncoming traffic, hit an SUV. 4 women in the SUV were injured. Well, it's the largest drug and cash seizure made by the Alberta Law Enforcement Response Unit since it was formed 6 years ago. It was called Apr.11, and when it was over, police in Calgary and Edmonton had seized $140,000 in cash and over $2 million in cocaine. It's believed some of that cocaine would have eventually hit Lethbridge streets. It all started in January. Calgary police seized 11 kilograms of cocaine from a passenger getting off a plane from BC at Calgary's International Airport. And that led investigators to Edmonton. And there, 4.5 kilograms of the drug were seized. Back to Calgary now. In mid-February, 12 kilograms of cocaine grabbed along with $140,000 in 10s, 20s, 50s, and $100 bills. The largest seizure the Alberta Law Enforcement Response Team has ever made.
This particular group, as I mentioned, was a sophisticated group. They were using various modes of transportation to bring the drugs into Alberta. Airlines, commercial trucking, and actually using personal vehicles that were outfitted with hidden compartments to secrete the drugs, and bringing in on a regular basis large quantities of cocaine.
6 people from Airdrie, Edmonton, and Vancouver were arrested and now face numerous drug-related charges. Dory, we've got some rain tomorrow, but it does look like the weekend it's going to warm up and we're going to see some more sun.
I know, and this time yesterday, Jackie, you and I were talking about the fact that the weekend was looking a little dicey with the chance of some flurry activity in the mix, and that's because it didn't look like the area of high pressure was going to rebuild itself, but it looks like it is going to do that. So we have one day of that precipitation, and there's going to be some large amounts in some areas of the province. Not so much here, though, and then we do rebound. So the weekend's looking great. I'll have all the details in a couple of minutes.
More weather to come. Thanks, Dory. Well, a new poll shows the Wild Rose Party continues to hold on to its lead in this election campaign. The Think HQ survey conducted for CTV has the Wild Rose in the lead with 43% of support. The PC's trailing by 14%, sitting at 29%. The Liberals and NDP continue to battle for a distant third. The poll also found that the number of undecided voters has dropped.
It's starting to crystallize now. People are starting to become more firm in their decision. Even within the last week, you've seen a drop of 2 percentage points in the undecided. I mean, that's within margin of error, but if you watch the trend over time, gradually the undecideds are starting to slip.
Now tonight, voters in Livingstone-Macleod's riding will get a chance to hear from their candidates. An election forum is being held at the Cowley District Hall from 7 until 9. Tomorrow morning, a meet and greet is being held with candidates in both Lethbridge East and Lethbridge West ridings. It'll be held at the Lethbridge Senior Centre starting at 10:30 a.m. And you can watch the leaders debate live on CTV. That happens tomorrow night from 6:30 until 8 p.m. Meanwhile, though, some political analysts say the leaders' debate is critical in the fight for who becomes premier. Dwayne Bratt says Smith and Redford are using this week to position themselves for the debate with big announcements and pledges. But Bratt will be looking to see who gets ganged up on.
The incumbent always has an edge. So, if they can just survive it without going down, is that sufficient? Likewise, the fact that Smith, does she show that she's the equal of Redford? Without the experience, without the governing time, either in cabinet or as premier, if she looks the equal, does that then tell people, I can see her as a premier?
Bratt says all 4 party leaders know how to represent themselves in front of big audiences, and he expects several attempts at the proverbial knockout punch. The Public Service Alliance of Canada says more than 5,500 civil servants have been told their jobs are being cut, and the union says that includes more than 1,100 members of Canadian Border Services. A spokesperson for the agency says it's still too early to tell where the cuts will come from and if any positions at the Coutts border crossing are in jeopardy. The New Democrats say the cuts are putting Canadians at risk since more than 19,000 jobs are expected to be lost over the next 3 years. And speaking of job cuts, more civil service job cuts were announced today, this time at CFB Suffield. The president of the union that represents national defense employees is confirming 67 civilian jobs at the base are being cut. John McLennan says the cuts will leave soldiers stressed and hamper anti-terrorism research. The Department of Defense is saying that many of today's positions that are being cut were hired for the Afghan conflict, and they say now is the time to reevaluate the workforce at the base. Well, Lethbridge's annual head count is underway. Census takers are going door to door, asking 3 quick questions about gender, age, and the number of people living in each household. The city says it's important that everyone takes part because they get about $500 in federal and provincial grants for every person that's counted. The city's population in 2011 was just under 90,000. You can also go onto the City of Lethbridge website and fill out the census online. She's the singing voice of McDonald's Canada, and now she's taking on the world.
And lambs.
Stephanie Savage gave us a taste of her song stylings this morning at the Fairview Plaza McDonald's. On Friday, she leaves for Orlando, Florida, site of the McDonald's Global Singing Competition. Savage says she is filled with nervous anticipation and will use the experience she gained in past competitions and anthem singing at the Lethbridge Hurricanes games when she hits the stage April 23rd.
I'm pretty excited. Like, I've never been involved in something this grand, I guess, before. So it's going to be a cool experience, and getting to take my mom to Florida, so that'll be good for her to be there as a support system. And so I'm pretty nervous, but I'm excited at the same time. Everything's been kind of overwhelming, but awesome.
You can vote for Stephanie by going online to voiceofmcdonalds.com. In the markets today, both the dollar and West Texas were down. Here are the final numbers.